In the 1990s, there was a boom in the music industry. The trickle-down effect was that punk rock became huge, like enormous. I understand that to some super punk rock people out there, that bands like Green Day and The Offspring aren't real punk rock. That's okay. I'm not talking about them, and I'm not the authority on this stuff anyways. Below the surface, where pop punk was hanging out and making waves, was another subgenre, a combination of working class oi music and hardcore punk that became known as street punk. The 90s were the biggest era of that particular sound, but where did it come from, and who started it? In an earlier episode of this series, I brought up the bands that I remembered as the biggest of that era and the scene. I missed a few and I got a couple things wrong, so let me correct that before moving on to the subject of this video. I will also make more videos talking about some lesser known street punk bands, Indonesian punk rock, women in punk rock, and more. So if you have input for those videos, I welcome it. Feel free to send me any photos or video to my channel email, thepunkrockreview@gmail.com, or simply leave a comment here. I read them all and I welcome the assistance. I'm not the authority on punk, and I don't know everything or every band, so don't assume I left anything out as a personal attack on you. Or feel that way if you want to, I don't really care. In the first video, I said that the Casualties on the Front Line came out in 2014, and that Jorge left the band in 2007. But I was reading too fast, and as it was pointed out to me, I mixed it up. Jorge left the band in 2017, and On the Front Lines was released in 2004. My apologies. Also, I'm being told that Mark Unseen was the lead singer, quote-unquote, way before the State of Discontent. I just didn't realize that. Someone that goes by Talk Hard commented, Paul Russo and Mark Unseen split drum and lead vocal duties until Paul left. Tripp was never their primary lead vocalist at any point. Maybe on a few songs, not even sure about that. But I saw them many times in their earlier years, and it was always Mark and Paul switching positions mid-set. So, assuming that is true, my apologies for that mistake as well. It just seems like I didn't realize Mark was singing as much as he did for the band at the time. I'm from Houston, and I only got to see them play twice. It was just an honest mistake. Before we get into specifics, I would like to notate here that these lines are all very blurred. There will be bands, songs, and people that nobody can agree on. Dates of events and people's importance will be argued, and that's okay. I don't know that we will ever get to a place where there's a universally agreed upon answer to all this. So remember that when you're telling me how wrong I am or calling me a lame poser. Okay, so let's get back to what we are all here for. Where did street punk come from and who started it? The term street punk started coming around in the early 1980s in reference to bands such as Total Chaos, GBH, and of course The Exploited. But I believe the term actually came from Steve Whale of The Business, trying to get away from the negative image of oi, and he was trying to rebrand his music in a way to get them accepted by the punk crowd and the punk clubs. That's what he said in an interview anyways. It was in Street Punk the Series Episode 1, Do or Die. Also, I believe in the UK, the term may mean something a little different than it does over here in the US. But it's a blurred line, like I said, for sure. The term encompasses all kinds of type of punk rock and oi music. The one thing that everybody agrees on, though, is that it's working class music, and every man's type of song. By the time the term made its way to the US, it seems to have been associated with the mohawk-clad folks with leather jackets and such. But it seems to have originated with some of the oi bands. Kind of makes sense now why bands like Swingin' Utters would be considered street punk. To be honest, I didn't know it came from oi bands. I'd only heard the term when referring to bands like the Casualties and A Global Threat. Let's discuss some of these bands from the earlier era, who they were, what they were all about, a few from the skinheads and a couple from the punks. Oh, and one last thing. This is not a comprehensive list, so don't get mad if I don't mention your personal favorite band. Just let me know in the comments who you want to hear about, and I'll include as many of those as I can in future videos. The Business. Formed in 1979 in Lewisham, South London, England. The band lasted for 4 decades until their frontman Mickey Fitz died from cancer in December of 2016. The band's first release was the song Out in the Cold on the A Sudden Surge of Sound compilation album. The song has a sound more like something Billy Idol would have performed than something you'd associate with street punk. It's a great song, though. They played their first proper oi concert in 1981, supporting the Foreskins, and then they became closely associated with the oi scene from then on. While the oi movement was labeled as far right and racist, despite the fact that several of the major oi bands played at Rock Against Racism concerts and things of that nature, The business took a stance against political extremism with their Oi Against Racism and Political Extremism, but Still Against the System tour. Despite standing apart from the far right, the band also criticized communists in songs like Suburban Rebels. In November of 1981, they released their debut single, Harry May, which spent over 3 months in the UK indie chart, reaching number 13. After a little time and some changes within the band, their new lineup recorded the Smash the Discos EP, which was a number 3 indie hit, and after a short tour, they recorded their debut album, which was going to be called Loud, Proud, and Punk. The master tapes for the album went missing, and after disagreements between the band's label and the studio, they were forced to re-record the album, and it was later released as Suburban Rebels in May of 1983. The album was remixed by their label, Secret, without them knowing, and Secret's financial difficulties limited promotion of the album. Frustrated by this, the band split up, with the business members forming short-lived bands Chapter and Saberdance. In late 1986, Mark Brennan founded Link Records. He became increasingly busy running the label, and then the band split up again. In 1992, Mickey Fitz performed a few songs guesting with The Elite, and he reformed the business to play a benefit concert for Bobby Moore, who had recently died of cancer. Brennan later started a new record label, Captain Oi Records, and did not join the reformed band. The band released a new single, Anywhere But Here, and a new album, Keep the Faith, in 1994. After a number of tours in Western Europe, the band played their first gigs in America in August of that same year. In 1997, the business released The Truth, The Whole Truth, and Nothing But the Truth, which was produced by Lars Fredriksson of Rancid. In 2000, the band joined together with the Dropkick Murphys to release Mob Mentality. The band's final studio album, No Mercy for You, was released in 2001. Their biggest hit song in recent times, England 5, Germany 1, based on the result of a World Cup qualifying match in 2001, became a football anthem for England and even appeared in the 2004 teen comedy Euro Trip. Despite various lineup changes, the band's popularity continued to grow. Fitz had rebuilt the band after overcoming alcoholism. That year saw the band take a 2-month tour of the US with another new lineup. The band took to the studio in Berlin and recorded 3 covers, one of which featured Mitch Harris of Napalm Death as a guest, recording the title track Mean Girl, originally by the band Status Quo. This was released by Bad Dog Records as an EP, the B-side being a live set recorded at the Marquee Club in London in 1982. In late 2015, Mickey Fitz was diagnosed with cancer of the lymph gland and underwent radiotherapy. On December 1st of 2016, it was announced that he had died. Sparrer, formed in 1972 in the East End of London. Although they have never really enjoyed commercial success, they've helped pave the way for the early 80s punk scene and the Oi subgenre that runs alongside punk rock. Their songs have been covered by many punk, Oi, and hardcore bands as well. Their style is influenced by many types of rock and roll, including pub rock, glam rock, and raw 1960s beat music, bands like The Small Faces and The Who. Their lyrics mostly deal with topics related to the daily lives of working class people. Their original name, Cock Sparrow, is a Cockney term of familiarity. A cocksparrer is basically just a mispronunciation of that. Cocksparrer was founded by Colin McFall, Mick Bophy, Steve Burgess, and Steve Bruce, who had known each other since the age of 11. Playing in nightclubs in and around London, they developed the style that was later to be known as street punk or Oi, mixed with pub rock and even some R&B influences. In 1976, Carrie Lemon, who was Burge's cousin, In 1976, Steve's cousin, Gary Lemon, joined the band as a second guitarist, and the band met with Malcolm McLaren, who was considering managing Cocksparrer alongside the Sex Pistols. In 1977, the band secured a deal with Decca Records, who were hoping to cash in on the now blooming punk rock movement. The first Cocksparrer single was Runnin' Riot, released in May of 1977. Unfortunately, it did not sell very well, nor did the following single, a cover of the Rolling Stones' We Love You, so the band was dropped by Decca in 1978. The band members had already recorded an album's worth of material, which was only released in Spain as Cocksparrer and was not officially issued in the UK until Razor Records released it in 1987 as True Grit. Cocksparrer ceased activity in late 1978, with Lemon leaving the group. In 1981, old Cocksparrer songs were included on several Oi compilation albums, and interest in the band began to rise again. They reformed in 1982 and signed to a French label that would eventually be bought by Warner Brothers Music Group, which released the England Belongs to Me single. The next release was the band's debut album, Shock Troops, in 1983. It included the songs Where Are They Now, I Got Your Number, and Riot Squad, among many others. It's widely considered an absolute classic. 10 out of 10, no skips, especially for me. I love that album. The band's third album, Runnin' Riot, in '84, was released in October of that year, after which the band ceased activity once more. A live album recorded around this time as well was released in 1987. The band performed several reunion concerts in 1992, and in 1994 they released a new album, Guilty as Charged. In 1997, they released the album Two Monkeys. Since then, Sparrer has occasionally toured and has performed sporadically at punk festivals. UFC fighter Dan Hardy has used the song England Belongs to Me as his walkout music. In 2012, Sparrer marked their 40th anniversary along with Rancid, who were celebrating their 20th anniversary. They played 5 sold-out concerts in the United States, 2 in Philadelphia, 1 in Boston, and 2 in San Francisco, and then headlined the Christmas Bash in Birmingham as part of the Rebellion Festival on December 8th of 2012. At the time of recording this, Sparrer are about to release their 8th and final album called Hand on Heart. They've just released 3 singles called Here We Stand, I Belong to You, and With My Hand on My Heart. All 3 have been excellent songs, and this album is shaping up to be a classic, and it's kind of nice to see a band leave on a high note like this. Sham 69, an English punk rock band that formed in Hersham in 1975. They changed their musical direction after seeing the Sex Pistols play live in early 1976. They were one of the most successful punk bands in the United Kingdom, achieving 5 top 20 singles, including If the Kids Are United and Hurry Up Harry. The group's popularity saw them perform on the BBC's Top of the Pops, and they appeared in the rockumentary film DOA. The original unit broke up in 1979, with frontman Jimmy Percy moving on to pursue a solo career. In 1987, Percy and guitarist David Parsons reformed the band, joined by some new personnel. Although subsequently going through a number of lineup changes, Sham 69 remained active and were still playing gigs as of 2022. According to some sources, the band was originally known as Jimmy and the Ferrets. Sham 69 is said to have derived from a piece of graffiti that co-founder Jimmy Percy saw on a wall. It originally said Walton and Hersham 69, but had partly faded away. It made reference to when Walton and Hersham Football Club secured the Athenian League title in 1969. Sham 69 released their first single, I Don't Wanna, on Step Forward Records in August of 1977, produced by John Cale of the Velvet Underground. Its success in the independent charts prompted Polydor Records to sign the band. Their major label debut was Borstal Breakout in January of 1978, followed by UK singles chart success with Angels with Dirty Faces, that reached number 19 in May of 1978, and If the Kids Are United, which reached number 9 in July of 1978. These songs weren't included on the group's debut album, Tell Us the Truth, a mixture of live and studio recordings. The group had further success with Hurry Up Harry. It reached number 10 on the pop charts in October of 1978, which came from their second LP and first full studio album, That's Life. The band's popularity was enhanced by their performances on Top of the Pops, and the band performed in the film DOA around this time as well, although the film was not released until 1980. Sham 69 would ultimately be one of the most successful UK punk rock bands, releasing 5 singles that cracked the top 20 of the UK singles chart. The band eventually started to move away from punk rock to embrace a sound heavily influenced by classic British rock, such as bands like The Who, The Rolling Stones, and Faces. This was demonstrated by their third album, The Adventures of the Hersham Boys. Sham 69 have been cited as a major influence in the Oi and UK punk in the late 1970s, and also on the working class street punk music subgenre of the 1980s and 90s. UK Subs. Formed in 1976, they're an English punk rock band among the earliest in the first wave of British punk rock. One of the first hardcore punk bands to include elements of rhythm and blues music, including the harmonica as an occasional element of their work, making them a very diverse punk rock band. Although the UK Subs were part of the original punk movement in England, the band originally started playing as part of the pub rock scene under the name The Marauders. In 1976, after seeing a couple of punk rock shows at the Roxy, the band decided to become a punk band, changing their name at first to the Subversives, but later modifying it to the UK Subs. Their style combined the energy of punk rock and the rock and roll edge of the then thriving pub rock scene. On a separate note, can anybody explain to me the difference between punk rock and pub rock? I'd really like to know. I don't understand the difference in the two subgenres. In 1978, the band played some opening gigs for the Police. In 1980, the band had some member changes, and subsequently, some of their songs took on a more heavy metal influenced edge. The band released a bunch of albums throughout the 1980s and had more lineup changes, but kept going nonetheless. In 1991, they even had Lars Frederiksen on a 30-date UK tour about the same time he was joining Rancid. To celebrate 40 years since its release, Demon Records issued a special edition copy of Another Kind of Blues and a box set of two 10-inch colored vinyl records on April 13, 2019. This was soon followed by the next album in succession, Brand New Age, on July 12th of 2019. Crash Course and Diminished Responsibility have also been reissued, and Cleopatra Records has released expanded version of Endangered Species. In what was advertised as the UK Sub's final album, Reverse Engineering, a studio record of all new material, it was released on July 1st of 2022. On August 20th of the same year, the band played what was billed as their final show in Ireland, performing at Voodoo in Belfast. The Exploited, the band that kind of popularized and standardized the punk rock uniform. Definitely where the mohawk and studded leather jacket look came from. A Scottish punk rock band from Edinburgh formed in 1978. The band maintained a large cult following in the 1980s with both a hardcore working-class punk and skinhead audience. Originally a street punk band, The Exploited eventually became a crossover thrash band with the release of their album Death Before Dishonor in 1987. Although The Exploited continued to perform live, they have not released any studio material since Fuck the System in 2003. The band's politics are reflected in its name, coined by drummer and songwriter Andy McNiven, whose father was a Korean War veteran and a communist. While in the early stages as a band, with little equipment, they were invited to play their first gig at Cragmere School. The band seemed to be a victim of their own publicity here. They had spray painted their name in public places, had stolen newspapers, milk, and rolls in the early hours of a Sunday morning, then redistributed them outside people's front door with a note saying, "A gift from the Exploited." Their first gig was on a Friday, December 15th of 1978. The date was recalled by McNiven as it coincided with a performance by The Damned by another name, at Clouds in Edinburgh, to which they went after performing their own gig. Their show was attended by Terry's older brother Waddy, who recently left the army and was a punk rocker in London. Influenced by 1970s punk rock, such as music by the Sex Pistols, the quartet created a simple, no-frills sound characterized by speed and aggression. In 1980, they founded their own independent record label, Exploited Records, and released their debut EP, Army Life, which got to number 6 in the indie charts for 8 weeks straight. Then it was in the top 20 for 18 months. In March of 1981, the band signed to Secret Records and spent a month recording their debut album, Punk's Not Dead. The Exploited released the single Dogs of War, which peaked at number 2 in the independent charts and number 63 in the UK charts. The LP, released in April of 1981, went to number 20 in May. Then it worked its way up to number 1 on the independent charts. During this time, The Exploited appeared on the popular mainstream TV program Top of the Pops. A lot of the fans of The Exploited were very unhappy with the band's decision to appear on this show. The hardcore punk band Conflict wrote the song Exploitation about this appearance, which began a long-standing rivalry between Conflict and The Exploited that divided the punk fan base. In early 2003, the band released the album Fuck the System on Dreamcatcher Records, and in the following year, they toured the UK and the US in support of that album. On October 14th, 2003, about 500 fans started a riot in Montreal, Canada, after an Exploited concert was canceled due to the band not being allowed into the country. Rioters destroyed 8 cars and set them on fire, broke 11 shop windows, and caused other damage. They were even banned from playing in Mexico City due to that same riot. In a 2012 interview, Waddy claimed that a new album was being finished. Then in February 2014, Waddy suffered a heart attack while on stage during a performance in Lisbon on the band's Taste of Chaos tour with Hatebreed and Napalm Death. He was taken to a hospital where he was expected to receive treatment for at least a week. The same year, the band signed a deal with Nuclear Blast Records to have many of their albums reissued. In March of 2020, Waddy responded to the coronavirus outbreak that was forcing bands to cancel or postpone tours. He commented by taking a shot at Green Day, a band on many occasions he's admitted to hating, by saying, "Fuck coronavirus. I have had 5 heart attacks and a quad heart bypass. Also a heart pacemaker fitted. Cancel gigs for a virus? We ain't fucking Green Day. We're the real deal. No danger in us canceling our upcoming gigs. Punk's not dead." Then the Australian leg of the tour was promptly cancelled 4 days later, though the band completed all scheduled dates in New Zealand. The Exploited are one of the most iconic bands of the UK 82 punk movement, along with GBH and Discharge. The term UK 82 came from the Exploited song of the same name. The Exploited have been described as one of the most riveting British punk rock units of the early 1980s, and I would have to agree wholeheartedly. Discharge. Formed in 1977 in England, the band is known for influencing several subgenres of extreme music, and their songs have been covered by some of the biggest names in punk, metal, and other genres. The punk rock subgenre of D-beat is named after Discharge and the band's distinctive drum beat. The band is characterized by a minimalistic approach to music and lyrics, using a heavy, distorted, and grinding guitar-driven sound and raw, shouted vocals, similar to a political speech, with lyrics on anarchist and pacifist themes over intense, drone-like monotone rhythms. Discharge paved the way for an astounding array of politically motivated, musically intense, and deeply confrontational bands. Discharge was explicitly political and displayed a revolutionary or activist attitude that motivated British hardcore punks away from its pub rock origins and towards a dangerous and provocative or anti-establishment leftist territory. Discharge paved the way for various extreme metal styles such as thrash metal, black metal, crust punk, and grindcore. The band's brutal extremist approach and extreme thrash noise style of playing eventually led to the thrash genre. Discharge's influence on heavy metal is incalculable, and metal bands such as Metallica, Anthrax, Machine Head, Sepultura, Soulfly, Prong, and Arch Enemy have covered Discharge's songs in tribute. Discharge was a major influence on at least 2 generations of metal. The musical style of the band was initially influenced by 1977-era punk bands such as the Sex Pistols, The Damned, and The Clash. The group soon abandoned the Sex Pistols-influenced material and developed a new set of songs with a retooled sound. Anthony Roberts played guitar with a heavy, distorted, and grinding style, and the vocals were shouted or screamed without much melody. The bassist played with an immense, gurgling, overdriven bass tone, and the tempo of the band's songs also steadily increased over the next year or so. The new, harder edge style also tended to use much darker, more nihilistic and violent lyrics, focusing on anarchist and pacifist themes while emphasizing the grisly effects of nuclear warfare and the social ills caused by capitalism. Like the band Crass, Discharge supported anarchism and displayed the anarchist symbol in their art and on their merch. The band also expressed its political and social themes in its album's artwork, which depicted the horrors of war using an iconic black and white photography style. One of the most notable images is the impaled dove artwork from a 1930s John Heartfield anti-war poster, which depicts a dove impaled on a bayonet. A punknews.org music reviewer argued that the early 1981 EP Y revolutionized everything, paving the way for the atonal shredding of hardcore punk, thrash, death metal, and grind, but also the dead serious political ideals and brutal backing of crust punk. Author and music historian Ian Glasper described the EP as one of the most potent anti-war records ever made. Discharge recorded their first full-length album, 1982's Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing, which was the #1 punk rock album of all time in a poll by Terrorizer magazine. The album reached number 2 on the indie album chart and number 40 in the UK albums chart. In David Kano's History of Heavy Metal, he calls the album the band's crowning achievement, a mercilessly brutal masterpiece. Treble Zine states that the music on the album was much, much heavier than previous punk rock albums and states that it influenced lots of punk rock and metal music with its raw and intense sounds. Scott Ian, guitarist for Anthrax, also said, "When you put on Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing now, it's still as heavy and brutal as anything out there." As well as bringing the D-beat subgenre into existence, Discharge influenced bands operating within other types of extreme music. Decibel magazine states that there are few bands who have had more influence over so many different scenes than Discharge, including the first generation of thrash bands, grind, and hardcore bands. Discharge have also been credited for laying the groundwork for grindcore. Early grindcore acts such as Napalm Death and Repulsion were influenced by the band. as were early death metal acts such as Celtic Frost and Nihilist. Discharge were also crucial to the development of crust punk, influencing many of the first crust bands such as Doom, Hellbastard, and Antisect.
Complete control. Oh, don't you know? Complete control. Oh, don't you know?
Total Chaos. Formed in 1989 in Pomona, California. The band recorded their first demo titled Punk Invasion in 1991, followed by the 7-inch EP Nightmares in 1992. In 1993, the band recorded their debut album, We Are the Punks, We Are the Future, shortly after Gary Doom left the band, being replaced by Ronald McMurder. Total Chaos reached out to Epitaph Records, and they decided to sign the band and then release the 1994 album Pledge of Defiance. To support the release, a tour was booked with the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. Odd choice in my opinion, but I bet it was a great show. After the end of that tour, a second album for Epitaph Records was recorded in 1995 called Patriotic Shock, adding Germ as the second guitarist. Once again, the band toured for the release, this time with Battalion of Saints. Due to the strong message against racism and socio-political subjects, the band faced off against racist and nationalist organizations at the shows and the outright ban of the album in Japan. In the summer of the same year, Total Chaos visited Europe for the first time, with a new lead guitarist, Sean Smash, playing in Germany for the Chaos Days Festival, well known for the often violent environment. By early 1998, Total Chaos disbanded, although by September the group reformed with some member changes. The band then signed to Cleopatra Records to release In God We Kill in 1999, and the compilation Early Years 89 through 93 with the early demos and LPs. The band got back to touring with Blank 77 and in 2000 completed its first Japanese tour. Shortly after, the band recorded Punk Invasion, which was released on Reject Records in 2001. In 2002, the band was invited to the Warped Tour with bands like The Casualties, Pistol Grip, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Anti-Flag, and Bad Religion, among others. After the tour, original drummer Gearbox returned with the band, and with the new bassist Charlie, ex-member of Life's Halt, the band released Freedom Kills with SOS Records and toured with the Addicts, Exploited, and Conflict. On October 14, 2003, the band was scheduled to play Montreal with the Exploited, but due to the legal issues, both bands were retained at the U.S. border. One of the reasons was because the Exploited lied to the Canadian Customs, saying it was a road trip and they were not a band, being caught when an employee showed a photo of Waddy on stage performing. Total Chaos's entrance was denied due to the criminal records of some of the members, although Rob Chaos stated, "It should be against the law to pry into someone's past and dig up something they'd done 15 years ago." And I'd have to agree with that. After the cancellation of the show, some fans decided to cause riots and disorder. Some cars and shops were damaged, as well as a few police officers injured, and an undisclosed number of people were arrested. The events were widely covered by the media. Honestly, I'm not quite sure what Total Chaos is up to these days, but I'd love to interview Sean Smash on the channel. GBH. Formed in 1978, GBH were early pioneers of British street punk, often nicknamed UK82, with Discharge, Broken Bones, The Exploited, and the Verruchers. GBH have gone on to influence several punk rock musicians, but their influence has been especially far-reaching in metal, including the early Bathory albums, Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, Exodus, and each of the big four of thrash metal, Megadeth, Metallica, Slayer, and Anthrax. Metallica frontman James Hetfield has repeatedly expressed enthusiasm for GBH and said such bands were the beginning of thrash metal to him. The band's name was originally Charged GBH, but then was shortened to just GBH. It is widely understood that the name came from then bassist Sean McCarthy being charged with grievous bodily harm. Not sure the validity of that, though. GBH embarked on several English and mainland U.S. tours during the early 1980s, including several gigs at the 100 Club. 1982 saw the release of GBH's first LP, City Baby Attacked by Rats, which reached number 17 in the UK albums chart, as well as number 2 in the UK indie chart. The band's singles had also reached UK indie chart. Leading to an appearance on the UK TV program The Tube, where they performed Give Me Fire. Lyrically, the album dealt with the criticism of British and European culture, violence, atheism, nihilism, humor, and morbidity, especially in reference to the song Passenger on the Menu, which describes in graphic detail the experiences of the passengers on the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 from 1972, where a plane carrying 45 people out of Uruguay en route to Chile crashed, killing a few on impact. A few more passengers died soon after, and then in order to survive, the remaining passengers resorted to cannibalism. I actually learned about this from this song. Musically, the album was loud and fast, with few songs exceeding 3 minutes. The success of the first album was repeated with their second LP, City Baby's Revenge, in 1983, and saw more extensive touring in America and Europe, and higher profile UK shows, including the Carlisle Punk Festival. With the Carlisle Punk Festival, the band co-headlined with fellow UK 82 stalwarts The Exploited, and shared the bill with the likes of Toy Dolls, Chelsea, and the Destructors. In 1984, the band dropped the Charged from their name and became just GBH. They and many of their UK 82 peers, such as The Exploited, Picture Frame Seduction, Discharge, and the Verukers, have all enjoyed success among punks in the United States. Although many of their contemporaries have evolved towards other styles over the years, GBH have remained fairly faithful to their original UK 82 sound in subsequent releases. However, the band have experimented with a more speed metal inspired and influenced sound to some degree, particularly those of Motorhead and Tank, notably with their 1992 release Church of the Truly Warped, although they have since returned to a more purist punk rock sound. The band is still active in touring and maintain a strong following both in the UK and the rest of Europe, as well as the United States and Japan. The band released their 12th studio album, Momentum, on Hellcat Records in 2017. One Way System. Formed in the Fleetwood area of Lancashire in 1979. A demo of their song Jerusalem was included on the A Country Fit for Heroes comp, released in January of 1982, and it reached number 4 in the UK indie charts. In 1981, Lightbeat and Beat the System co-released the No Entry EP. The A-side was Stab the Judge, and the B-side was Riot Torn City and Me and You. The first ever record released by One Way System was called Stab the Judge. After some early personnel changes, the lineup settled down with Gav White on vocals, Dave Krabby Ross on guitar, Gary Buckley on bass, and Tommy Gouch on drums. The Give Us a Future 7-inch was the first release on Cherry Red's Anagram Records in 1982. In the same year, Anagram also re-released No Entry as the Stab the Judge EP and the single version of Jerusalem. One Way System became Anagram Records' first signing with the release of the All Systems Go LP, following the Give Us a Future 7-inch success on the indie charts, and then the band being featured on the front cover of UK national music paper Sounds. Between 1982 and 1984, the band had 5 indie chart hit singles and 2 top 10 albums. A US West Coast tour alongside Circle Jerks in 1984 was abandoned when Circle Jerks vocalist Keith Morris broke his neck, although the band managed to salvage one date with suicidal tendencies. In 1985, Gav White was replaced on vocals by Andy Gibson of Preston punk band The Genocides, and the band remained signed to Anagram until they split in early 1986, with enough songs written for an unreleased third album. Tom Couch then spent 2 years with the UK Subs and has since been voted one of the best punk drummers of all time. One Way System was resurrected in 1995 with Gavin White returning after Captain Oi re-released All Systems Go and Writing on the Wall in CD format. Gaz Buckley left the band to be replaced by Dave Brown for a 10-day European tour. Brown was replaced in turn by Andy Wilkinson, and in 1996, Cleopatra issued a Best Of collection. Also in 1996, whilst working on a new album, Gavin White left the band and was replaced by longtime fan Lee Havoc, real name was Lee Pinkey, and it was with this lineup that they undertook a tour of Japan. The re-release of Car Bombs in Babylon sees One Way System continue to tour worldwide as of 2019.
The crossfire, and you live in day by day. Now life is lost its meaning. Your heart, it feels no love.
The Templars, the most modern band on this list. I felt like they should be included because they're like a bridge between the earlier 80s stuff that went through maybe the 90s to the bands that started in the 90s and ended in the early 2000s. The Templars are an Oi band formed in Long Island, New York in April of 1991. The band's musical influences include Oi, punk rock, glam, and rock and roll. They have tended to purposely use low-quality recording techniques, as their Acre Studios is actually a garage. The band's name comes from an ancient order of Christian militants called the Knights Templar. Their focus on Middle Age history is largely informed by the studies and interests of Carl, who is the singer and guitarist, and their drummer Phil. A Templars album cover was displayed in a History Channel documentary about the Knights Templar, the narrator stating that the legacy of the medieval organization has influenced varied aspects of modern society, including film, literature, and even, quote, hardcore street punk music, end quote. So, after a brief history and some of the key bands of the subgenre, where did street punk come from? Well, it came from the streets. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me at thepunkrockreview@gmail.com or leave your comments down below in the comment section. I would really appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Help us grow and make more videos like this, as I'm trying to make this more of a full-time job, and it takes a lot of my time to make each video. But regardless, thank you so much for your time. I sincerely appreciate it and hope you have a wonderful day. Peace.